Guys, Yoda video, we're going to be talking about the dungeon specific talents for Subtlety Rogue in Dragonflight Mythic Plus. So we'll start with the generic talent build, which you can just play in every dungeon and it'll be fine. Then we'll talk about what you change in general and for what reason. And then I have a little cheat sheet I'll show, and we'll go dungeon by dungeon as well. So this is the generic talents, where if you just want to ignore everything that I say in this video, you can just play this. Call it a day. Very comfy build, and it does pretty high damage, and it's relatively safe. All right, but this video is mostly about the choices you can make. So we'll start with the first choice, which is Cheat Death, Acrobatic Strikes, and Improved Ambush. So when do we want all three of these? So if you're newer to dungeons, and honestly, for most of the people, I recommend just taking Cheat Death all the time. I've been playing Cheat Death every dungeon, but there are a few dungeons where I'm considering dropping it, and we'll go into that later. So it really becomes between Acrobatic Strikes and Improved Ambush. So on Sim, Improved Ambush is 4.5% for my character, single target, and AoE. So on Dungeon Slice, basically that translates to 2%. AoE, it's useless, right? But Dungeon Slice is about 2%, and single target 4.5%. So a lot of people would say, okay, just play Improved Ambush all the time, no matter what, because of that. And if you want, you can do that. Dragonflight is all about choices, making meaningful choice just for yourself or for your group. Personally, I prefer Acrobatic Strikes in a lot of places, especially on Fortified. Some of the main reasons to make Acrobatic Strikes are, one, the affixes. So right now it's Storming. Storming makes you basically run around, changes your position a lot, and potentially fail mechanics if you're not at the right spot. Spiteful, obviously, makes you outrange the spiteful mobs that are chasing you. So these two are very good reasons to play Acrobatic Strikes. Then also there's a few dungeons, especially on Fort. Obviously, they do the same thing on Fort and Tyrant, it's just more dangerous on Fort. Where the mobs will like make you run out, and then also like another mob in the pack makes you interrupt it or stop it. That's where Acrobatic Strikes comes in. It's very useful. Also, if the pack is spread, then Acrobatic Strikes lets you hit everything with your AoE skills. And then on some bosses, it's very spicy to play in like full melee range the whole time. Obviously, it's doable because like other classes can do it, but Acrobatic Strikes is something you can take advantage of there. Okay, then we're gonna go over to the right side. So we've got these three: Shadow Focus, Shadow Blades, and Tornado. The vast majority of the time, you're gonna want Shadow Blades and Tornado. This is the most damage you can play. But if your group has like a lot of AoE damage and it's tyrannical, you could potentially drop Tornado for Shadow Focus for about 80% single target gain for like a pretty major AoE loss. And then also there's some dungeons where like some of the bosses will spawn like an ad phase, and those ads need to die or like something catastrophic is going to happen. And in those dungeons, I actually prefer Shadow Focus over Shadow Blades. Even though it's like an overall loss, it's better to make sure you make those DPS checks every time. And then also, the next choice you have is these three talents. The first time I talked about Sub-Rogue talents, I actually didn't consider Cloaked in Shadows, but after playing High Tyrannical, this talent is very, very useful for surviving, either putting into rotation with Cloak of Shadows to survive certain boss mechanics, or just as an extra personal cooldown. Only take this if you know specifically when you're using it in every dungeon. Otherwise, if you're just using it like reactionary, you're better off with Fade to Nothing. Just 10% damage reduction. And if you're not playing either of these, like if you don't have a good reason to play either of these, then Without a Trace is very useful for just like jumping around packs with Shadow Strikes and doing the right stops. So yeah, that's when you take these. So I did promise this cheat sheet after this. Here we go, one sec. Yeah, this is the cheat sheet. We'll be going over this every dungeon specifically in depth, but this is the cheat. I'll put a link to it afterward. Okay. So next is Dungeon by Dungeon. We'll go Algathar first. In Algathar, I'm taking Cloaked in Shadows on Tyrannical, and Without a Trace on Fortified. Tyrannical, no Acrobatic. Fortified, no Improved Ambush. And no Shadow Focus either. So why do we take Cloaked in Shadows on Tyrannical? Main reason is Veximus. He's going to put out Mana Bomb And if you don't have anything on high tyrannical, you're probably gonna die or cheat, unless your healer's like super on top of things. So oftentimes he'll give you mana bomb, like you'll cloak the first, then he gives you another one, you vanish, shield that one. Third one, you health pot. Fourth one, hopefully you have cloak again, that kind of thing. So just having cloaked in shadow just gives you an extra thing to rotate through. Also on Croth, if your group is for some reason going to like 7 stacks or something, you could use Cloaked in Shadows to survive an extra stack. But most of the time, they're not going to be going high enough for Cloaked in Shadows to matter on this guy, because like just with Feint, you live longer than much any other class. So the main reason is Veximus, which is a very difficult fight on High Tyrant. On Fort, we're preferring Without a Trace over that, since Veximus isn't going to one-shot you anymore. And there's a lot of dangerous casts like Surge on you, Mana Void on you, Arcane Missiles on you from here after they buffed it. And there's a bunch of stops you can use Vanish for, the cheap shot, like the Scepter's Arcane Rain, and the Battle Axe's Severing Slash on your tank. So on Fort, we prefer Without a Trace there. Acrobatic versus Improved Ambush is personal choice. I just take Improved Ambush on Tyrant and Acrobatic on Fort, just because the attack's going to get spread out a bit. So that's Algathar. Next we have Ruby. Ruby life pools. I'm preferring Cloaked in Shadows on Tyrant and Fade to Nothing on Fort. There's almost no ground effects that make you run around, so I tend to play without Acrobatic Strikes here. And I play no Shadow Blades because of the second boss. So go into a little more detail. Cloaked in Shadows is useful on Tyrannical because of the last boss. So this boss has 2 phases, right? Phase 1 and Phase 2, and I guess he has Phase 3 when the dragon's dead, but who cares? So in Phase 1, he's going to give you Flame Spit sometimes, and on High Tyrant, this will actually kill you, even through some healing, if you don't cloak. But at the same time, you don't want to cloak in Phase 1 because you want it for Phase 2, right? So a nice middle ground there is to play Cloaked in Shadows, and you can use Vanish when he picks you with Flame Spit. It'll still go on you, but the 30% shield should ensure you live, even with no healing on that Flame Spit. So that's why I play Cloaked in Shadows on Tyrant. In general, though, Fade to Nothing is very good in this dungeon because there are a bunch of like healer checks which you're not gonna have Vanish for every time. Like these guys will cast Inferno every like 20 seconds, so Fade to Nothing is very useful for that. This boss's ad also casts the same Inferno. Fade to Nothing is very good for that. So if you want, you could play Fade to Nothing on Tyrant as well, but I only play it on Fort. And then why am I playing Shadow Focus in this dungeon and not Shadow Blades? That's because this boss spawns ads, and making that ad check is very important. Like if any of these bosses' ads cast Inferno a second time, oftentimes it's just a wipe. And if it casts like Inferno a third time, where it spawns a second ad while that ad is alive, it's just over, right? So you need to make sure you have damage for every single one of these ads, and in my opinion, it's better. You're better off with Shadow Focus than Shadow Blades doing that. You could just play Shadow Blades and not care about that. Next Dam, that's also perfectly viable, but personally, I play no Shadow Blades. Next, we'll go to Azure Vault. So in Azure Vault, I'm playing Without a Trace all the time, no Damage, and also no Shadow Blades all the time in Azure Vault. So why do we play Without a Trace? It's mainly for the last boss. This boss puts a really annoying slow on everyone. He also has a bunch of mechanics that make you like either get knocked back or run around killing crystals or chasing the tank or dodging an orb. So Without a Trace is very useful for using Vanish to drop the slow stacks and jump around with Shadow Strike on that boss. On Trash, like the extra Vanishes are pretty useful too, but not like specifically the reason you take it. Like being able to stun this piercing shards on your tank is very useful with Cheap Shot, and also random flower casts you can Cheap Shot as well. No improved ambush, so the first boss makes you run around like to break the trees with the circles. Also, acrobatic strikes will let you get more combo points because oftentimes you won't be in the boss hitbox is really big. So oftentimes you won't be in range of like the little blobs blowing up, and acrobatic strikes makes you in range more. On second boss, like you're gonna during the intermission, it's the only hard part. You're going to be dodging orbs a bunch and dodging swirlies on the ground. So maybe you're like an insane gamer. You can keep good uptime with improved ambush. But in my experience, acrobatic strikes makes this boss a lot easier. Third boss, your improved damage is probably going to be more damage on third boss, to be honest. But you're going to be losing uptime a lot on this boss unless your strategy is perfect because of Frost Bomb that's making you spread out / not cut each other off. I like acrobatic there. And on this boss, like if your strategy is perfect, you don't need it. But acrobatic strikes makes this boss a lot comfier, especially if the crystals aren't all spawned stacked of each other. And in this dungeon, there tends to be a lot of spread cleave. Like these pulls not particular, but like anytime this Crystal Fury is involved, there's going to be a lot of like stopping / tank cutting going on. These blobs are going to make your tank run around a lot. And this mob, this mob, going to make your tank run around a lot. So acrobatic strikes is actually very, very useful for trash in this dungeon. Then while we're playing no Shadow Blades, I play Shadow Focus mostly for this boss's ad phase. You basically just want to make sure you have damage for every single ad. You know, like show up to the ad, have no damage, and then just have to move on. Not that important, but I do prefer Shadow Focus. Also, like, you could say, oh, just save Shadow Blades for the ad phase, but Shadow Blades gets a lot worse if your uptime is not 100%. And in the ad phase in this boss, it's very hard to have 100% uptime. So I am a Shadow Focus enjoyer in this. Next, we're going to talk about Nokud Academy, Nokud Offensive. I'm playing Cloaked in Shadows on Tyran, which is very important on Tyran. I don't play Improved Damage anywhere in the dungeon, and I don't play Shadow Focus because there's no first boss, but okay. Why am I playing Cloaked in Shadows on Tyran? The main reason is this third boss. Her Gale Arrow does insanely high damage for some reason, and in high keys, like basically for my rogue 23+, if I don't have either Cloak or Vanish Shield or an external, then it's cheat death or real death. And she does it like every like 55 seconds or something, which is really annoying because you can't cloak every other, it's every third. So the way you rotate it is like you could do Cloak first or Vanish first, whatever one you want, and then the other one second. Third one is going to be either external or cheat, and then fourth is Cloak or Vanish again, fifth Cloak or Vanish, etc. If you don't have Cloaked in Shadows, then it's like Cloak first, cheat second, dead third. So yeah, Cloaked in Shadows is very important for this boss on High Tyran. But on Fort, this boss isn't going to one-shot you, so you need it a lot less. I prefer without a trace because these packs tend to get really spread out, especially this packs with a bunch of archers and the War Stomp making your tank run out. These pulls with like Chant of the Dead making your tank run around, and the Souls making everyone run around. They tend to get really spread out, so acrobatic strikes and without a trace, I think, are both very useful in this. Yeah, so that's Nokud. Next, we're gonna go to the old dungeons, Court of Stars. Fade to Nothing is my preferred on Tyrant, so I go Fade to Nothing, no Improved Ambush, and no Shadow Focus. Fort is the same, except I don't play Fade to Nothing. The main reason I play Fade to Nothing here and not in most other dungeons anymore is because of this boss, second boss. Her damage is basically just she's permanently like powering herself up with Burning Intensity and that's rotting the group down. So it's not like there's one particular point in the fight where like, oh, this is when I vanish. But instead, it's like more of a rot fight where you're permanently taking damage. So Fade to Nothing is a lot better for that kind of thing. Honestly, nothing else in this dungeon is hard at all on Tyrannical, so that's the only thing worth like changing your talents for. Also, I tend to find that having like the bosses aren't really that difficult, except this one in terms of DPS checks. Like the last boss, you can live forever after the nerf, and they also force you to run out. Like this boss makes you run out during Slicing Maelstrom. This boss will like spawn like either do the frontal backle and then first. So just in general, I think acrobatic strikes is more comfy, but improved damage is definitely more damage in this dungeon. So you can play whichever one you want. On Fortified, we're not too worried about this boss killing our group anymore, so we just play without a trace for comfiness. You can vanish the slow on this guy one extra time. Yeah. Improved acrobatic strike is also really useful in the beginning because these kind of beasts tend to like are gonna drop a bunch of swirlers in the ground, and this guy's like charge smash. So there's a bunch of position requirements. Definitely doable without acrobatic, but I prefer acrobatic here. Next we have Halls of Valor. Halls of Valor is a tricky one. You definitely want Without a Trace, no matter what, Fortified and Tyrant, just because you can use Double Vanish on Fenrir. If you happen to have another Rogue and you don't need to Double Vanish, then Cloaked in Shadows is very good. But most of the time, we're going to want Without a Trace. So Acrobatic and Improved Ambush IMO are both very close in this dungeon. Like, the bosses are kind of hard, and on the bosses in particular, you don't really need Acrobatic Strikes to keep full uptime. But on the trash, Acrobatic Strikes is very useful. So on Fortified, I always take it. On Tyrant, I'd think about it depending on the group. But why is it so important on these packs? So on this pull, like all these pulls with Shield Maidens, or these Bulls, or the Bears, unless it's like a low key, there is no tank in this game that's able to tank those just permanently, except maybe a Warrior. Without kiting, and anytime the tank kites, these packs are going to get spread out, so Acrobatic Strikes is way better on trash. Also, there's another part where, like in, for instance, this pull, the Maiden will be doing frontals, and at the same time, you need to be interrupting the Rune Carver and the Thundercaller. There's a Thundercaller, like there's one in this pull. Yeah. And at the same time, the Thundercaller is putting out Thunderstrike, which puts a circle that you cannot spread. And then at the same time, there's also Thunder that you have to do. So Acrobatic Strikes is very, very useful on trash here. But if you're like super confident in your group, aka not in a pug, then Improved Damage is definitely worth it on bosses here. In this. Okay, next we have Shadow Moon. Shadow Moon, I'm playing Cloaked in Shadows, Ford and Tyran. No Acrobatic because it's pretty chill dungeon, nothing's really happening. No Shadow Blades, so I play Shadow Focus here. Why am I playing Cloaked in Shadows? The main reason is this second boss. This is like the only thing I think that you could actually die to, other than like randomly first boss healing check. Is this Soul Steal? He'll like make you fight an ad, and the ad is permanently draining your health. And Subrogue in particular, if you don't have Dance or like no other damage, this ad can actually be very hard. I like to have Cloaked in Shadows for that. Nothing else really hurts that much. You could potentially play Fade to Nothing because of first boss, but that's up to you. I prefer Cloaked in Shadows, but you know, don't. This is another dungeon where I drop Shadow Blades. That's because there's a bunch of ad DPS checks, first, second, and last boss. So this boss casts Dark Communion. If he eats the ad, GG. You want to have damage for every ad. Shadow Focus is important there. This boss will cast Soul Steal. You need to kill your ad before it kills you. Place you want damage. For multiple scenarios. And this boss will cast the Ritual of Bones, where you have to kill a bone or your whole group wipes to the wall. Especially post-nerf, or post-buff, whatever it is. So yeah, Shadow Focus is my preferred choice. Next we have Temple of the Jade Serpent. Temple I play Cloaked in Shadows, and then Iron, no Acrobatic, Fort, no Improved Ambush. Play Shadow Blades. So why do we play Cloaked in Shadows? The main reason is the last boss. This boss casts Bounds of Reality every 1 minute, which spawns an ad that hits you, and then during that, the boss is also casting Wither Will, which just does random damage to everyone. It's a very spicy time, and you could potentially die. But Rogue is very strong. You can evasion every other Bounds of Reality, so your ad won't actually hit you. So let's say you evasion 1, 3, 5, right? Then 2 and 4, you basically have nothing if you like need a cloak elsewhere. So that's where Vanish comes in with Cloaked in Shadows. Between Evasion and Cloaked in Shadows, Rogue is actually very tanky against this boss. But if you don't take Cloaked in Shadows, you will be pretty squishy in that head phase, so watch out. That's why I take Cloaked in Shadows. As for Acrobatic versus Improved Ambush, this trash does do a bunch of stuff that makes you like run out or run line or run around. So I prefer Acrobatic, especially on Fort. But, you know, these bosses aren't that crazy. Like this boss, literally, you can stand still the whole time. This boss is mostly a target dummy. This boss just run out every now and then. And this boss, when he's not in the ad phase, is just a target dummy for you. So Improved Damage definitely has value on Tyran. But I prefer Acrobatic Strikes on Fortified. And honestly, this week on Tyran because of Storming, but yeah, that's another story. So yeah, that's all the dungeons. The last thing I wanted to talk about is some choices that I don't currently make, but I'm considering in the future. So one of them is flagellation. Currently, I'm not playing this, but I think it's because my mastery is really high in comparison to the rest of my stats. This is definitely viable. I've seen other rogues playing it. It just hasn't been performing well for me personally, so I don't play it. And then cheat death. The only dungeons I would consider dropping cheat right now are Azure Vault. I feel like if you're on top of your game, all the damage in this dungeon is predictable and non-lethal, so you should be able to not take cheat here. Board of Stars, same thing. All the damage is predictable and non-lethal. Shadow Moon, like nothing's happening. Honestly, you could probably just play cheat or play no cheat on an acrobatic strikes, but that is getting a little bit spicier because like these blueberries kind of hurt sometimes. And in Temple, all the damage is honestly predictable, so I would consider not playing cheat death, but only if you're confident in your healer. Like this boss can get very difficult, and cheat death is pretty useful if your healer sucks or slash the level's just really high. But against all these ads, like if you just faint every one of these or vanish, you won't die to the eruptions. You don't stand anything because you're playing long arms, you won't die to those, that kind of thing. So I think no cheat is okay here. But definitely really spicy. So yeah, that's it for the talent video. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Sorry it's long. Yeah, hope everyone enjoys Dragonflight, and don't forget to catch me on stream. Later.